For those who don't know, Enlisted has made a lot of BR changes, and thus a lot of BR changes in the early tier. Hence, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the best beginner faction in Enlisted after the changes. So without further ado, let's get started. Before we start talking about the best beginner faction in Enlisted, we have to go over some things. For starters, this faction cannot be too overpowered. It has to be balanced. Hence, this is the beginner faction. It is not the most overpowered faction because beginners are meant to learn. They are not meant to completely overwhelm or not really be able to learn how to play the game. Hence, balancing is important. It has to be balanced and it cannot be overpowered or underpowered so you can learn the game. It must have decent tanks and planes are pretty good or decent. Hence, let's move on to our first faction, and there are only really two factions that we can really count on. This is the USA and Germany. Both factions have decent tanks, with the Germans arguably have better tanks. Both planes are pretty good. To be exact, the Americans have better planes, but the Germans also have pretty good planes. And both sides have good SMGs. To be exact, the United States have the Sten, which is actually really good for this tier and tier 1. We also have really good rifles for both sides, mostly the Germans, and overall both sides allow you to learn the game. And this is especially so after the latest update, in the sense that Enlisted has decreased some of the weapons, such as the Sten for the Americans, and of course other weapons such as the IAR-81C have been moved up a tier. This has made almost everything more balanced for almost every faction, and it especially has made things more balanced in Tier 1 and Tier 2 section of Enlisted. Hence, we also do have to talk about what factions are not a good idea, and these are the Japanese and the USSR. For Japan, we have the issue of having a good SMG and having good infantry, but having some of the worst tanks as the start of the game. As a matter of fact, these are not even considered tanks. Some of them are extremely bad to the point I essentially don't suggest a tank, and the only thing you have to use right now are planes, which is not really giving you the experience of a beginner faction. Once again, beginner factions, you should be able to use every single thing. Hence, you should have a good solid tank, you should have a good solid plane, you should have a good solid infantry line and whatnot. This can be said for the Soviet Union, except for this time it's quite the opposite. Whereas the Japanese don't have a lot of good stuff, the Soviets have some of the best stuff at tier 1/2. For example, the Soviets have the T-70, T-60, and whatnot to BT-5. We also have a good set of planes, pretty powerful submachine gun lineup, and overall, moving on to BR-3, we even have even more overpowered stuff for the Soviet Union. Hence, the Soviet Union is along the lines of having too much overpowered stuff, and hence too much overpowered stuff means that it's still not a very good idea for a beginner faction. Once again, it cannot be overpowered. That said, this is my pick for an overpowered faction. If you are a beginning faction, you either pick the United States or the Germans. To be exact, I rather prefer the Germans, but that's because that's my personal preference, and Germans have a lot of factions and a lot of players. Hence, what's going to happen is that a lot of people are going to be playing the Germans, and what's end up going to happening is that the United States doesn't have enough players, and playing as the Germans allows you to have a much better time for beginners. Now, of course, if you are done playing the beginning and you want to move on, you can either stick with Germany or you can go on to the USSR, the USA, or the Japan. Japan is one of those factions in which I highly suggest that you don't do it unless you finish almost every other faction. So that's that. Without further ado, this is all it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next one.